Yeah, exactly, right? I'm going to press this button. It's blue, and momentarily it's going to go red. In fact, that was very quick. It just went red in immediately, which means we're live. Hello, everyone. Crikey. Well, it still says 1900 on my little computer clock, which means that we are not late, despite the fact that I started assembling this slide deck 20 minutes ago, which is shorter than ever before. But it's fine. Blame day job work. George is here. George Chilcott is here. George, wait a minute. Let me press this button. George, hello.
Hello. Thanks for having me.
No, it's a pleasure. I'm sure you know exactly how it is. I was panickingly. Actually, I've gone back to my roots. I've become a cat monkey again. In that I'm doing some weirdly being like helicoptered into a particular project that I'm definitely not going to name. It's not anything to do with your project. Don't worry. To do some epic fast CAD work. And it's like getting back to my roots again. It's quite good.
Very good.
Yeah. Anyway, right. Enough of me waffling. What are we here to do? Well, let's go back to the. We're here to talk. It's Railweek. It's Railweek, everyone. It's Railweek.
Happy Railweek.
Hooray! It's the first full week. It's always the first full week in October, right? Is that pretty much your, or does it ever shift slightly?
Well, that's how we time it every year, and it's been going since 2016. So we're in the 5th year.
I remember the first one. I think I got quite involved. I think I staffed a table in York Station actually for the first one. It's quite good. I was there like very pleased with my sort of saying hello, just waving at random passers-by on a table in. Yeah, that was the first Rail Week. I remember it. I did a presentation. I did. I could probably dust that presentation off and do like a comedy Rail Natter slide deck of my Rail Week slide presentation that I did. I went out to some like sixth form colleges and like did this presentation, and it was very clever. You clicked on a button, like you clicked on a thing on the slide, and this is already a massive digression. I'm so sorry, everyone. You clicked on a button on the slide, and it like took you to a thing describing all the different jobs that could be associated with that thing, and I liked it. Anyway.
Well, that's exactly what that's what we need. That's what Railweek's all about. And standing like a numpty in a railway station with a sign that says, the rail agency isn't the scary, inaccessible place that you think it might be. Is just the start. Every little helps. So.
I think the point was like you clicked on one thing and it just spat out a load of different jobs that you'd never think of. It's like, no, it's not just like the job, the railway engineer, the train driver, the station master, and that's it. That's not the whole railway. And it was kind of pointing out diversity of that. Anyway, we'll maybe get to that. Oh, I see Simon is in. Hi, Simon. Simon's in the chat. Hello, everyone who's joined us in the chat. Hello, Masquette. Oh, exciting Masquette news. Possibly to be teased later, but probably also next episode. But anyway, we'll get to that. Oh my goodness, George, we're already 3 minutes in, and I've just gone on a tremendous tirade and gone off on one. Right, so without further ado, let us press on to look at, first of all, the usual, which is our COVID stats. How's the sound balance, everyone? Are you, is it all fine, everyone in the chat? Let us know. It sounds pretty good at my end, but, right, so, here we go. Yeah, look, Rail has done it's gone a bit weird. And I think, so Rail looks a little bit like it's sort of leveling off here. So you can see this sort of bit here. It's kind of leveled off. It's leveling off at around the sort of 65 to sort of 70% mark. This is the overall trend. So you can see this is right back in the heady days before we knew what on earth was going on. The big drop, the steady climb through 2020, and then the big drop off through winter again. And we've got to be kind of aware that we are coming up to another winter period. And are we going to see more lockdowns, more? We just don't know. So got to pay attention to that. But I think the key question I've got, I mean, George, you might have an answer to this, but also in the chat, a few of you might have an idea of this, particularly anyone who's involved in timetabling or the train operating companies, is because I think possibly this could account for the slowing of those figures, is what percentage of pre-COVID timetable is actually being run at the moment, because it's not the full timetable. So there's a potential that if we are running a 75% timetable, that we're actually reaching the limit of people's ability to actually fit on trains. So we might well be more congested, the network might be, or trains might be more congested now than they were pre-COVID. So I'm interested, while kind of in the chat, if anyone has an answer to that, feel free to drop that in, because I'm very interested to know exactly what those numbers are, because if we're kind of punching up, if we're running a 75% service and we're kind of punching up against that, then it's pretty obvious that we're not going to be reaching any higher any point soon. So Yeah, we've got, so freight is definitely 100%. I'm aware of that. Rail freight is back to 100% of pre-COVID levels, and in lots of cases more than that. Simon can attest to that, I'm sure. In the chat, thanks, Simon. Yeah, and George, any thoughts? Have you got any thoughts on this? Have you seen got any insights on this from your perspective?
I mean, I'm an enthusiastic commuter, if anyone has ever said that. And I've been thoroughly encouraging people over the last few months where it's safe to get back to using the network and going back to work, supporting the local economy and such like, rather than just paying for Jeff Bezos to go to the moon or wherever he's gone. But no, I'm as intrigued by this as you are. Like you say, if there is a bit of a capacity ceiling, but we're seeing companies across the Young Rail Professionals network starting to mandate their staff to go back to work for a period of the week. To try and encourage collaboration and all the great things that you get out of going back to the office. So it surprises me that it's levelling. I would have thought towards any announcements being made, measures being made, that it would keep rising. So I'm afraid not.
Yeah, I mean, certainly from my the contacts I have within the various train operating companies, all of the long distance operators are running at more than pre-COVID levels now. They're like back to 90, 100%, and in some cases more. Some of those are still operating reduced timetables. So they're running even more full trains in some cases than they were pre-pandemic. And there's a mixed bag in some cases in relation to so Thameslink is running, in fact we've got Mike Wooldridge here pointing out for Thameslink that they're running at 100% off-peak and 75 to 80% peak. That's rough estimates. Thanks, Mike. Some of the long distance operators, some of the shorter distance operators, the mixed operators outside of London, are reporting higher loadings again. So 80%. So my guess is that there's still a substantial amount of inner London heavy rail commuting that is accounting for the lower numbers. But again, it's difficult to understand. I think I might put in a freedom of information request just to get the numbers exactly on what percentage fewer services are running now than were running at the start of 2020.
There's always the tourism element of rail, which the industry relied heavily on through the summer. That's likely to be tailing off now, as we go into shorter days and colder weather.
Yeah, for sure. So there's almost like a resetting of the pattern a bit, but still without people traveling abroad as much. There'll still be people wanting, their weekends, wanting to do something a weekend away. So, yeah, and of course, leisure, as I moaned about last week, leisure as a category is quite a weak way of capturing the non-traditional commute kind of business travellers, because actually leisure covers a lot of people travelling for necessary journeys, whether it's students or people seeing family and so on. So yeah, it's interesting stuff anyway, as ever. So already some good chat going on there in the sidebar. Thanks everyone. So, right, okay. The news. Talking of which, rail freight saves supermarkets bacon. Actually, the apostrophe should be after the S there, really. In fact, I have the technology. Wait a minute. Watch this. Here we go. And there. So, professional as ever. Yes, Tesco has pointed out the fact that its use of rail freight for keeping shelves stocked during the supply crisis has been a key factor in its continuing to make profits and continue to keep shelves stocked. I mean, it's a good news story, but also it's bleedingly obvious that when you've got a shortage of drivers, moving a lot of stuff, particularly when it comes to some of the challenges that this is a good example of lots of things, not just rail freight kind of domestically, but also rail freight getting over some of the Brexit border challenges, is that these trains are coming up from Spain through a lot of the material are coming up through Spain, from Spain through the Channel. So, well worth having a look into detail about this, but it's a really, really good news story. I don't know, it's good to see this sort of thing, George, isn't it? It's a shame we don't shout more loudly about it.
Yep, I agree entirely. It's a natural progression. Get the lorries off the road, and it brings with the additional benefits, like you say. One person with a piece of green or greener equipment moving an awful lot of stuff around the country without clogging up the roads, without polluting as much. It's the future.
It's the future. It is. It's as simple as that. It's the future, folks. Long distance goods travel is just stupid to be done on the roads. It really is. So that's good news. Some slightly more strange news. So, competition, rather than, thinking about where the place that might be best is and then doing it there, there's going to be another competition. Hooray! No, not hooray, because Great British Railways is finding its new headquarters. Rather than making use of the existing facilities that Network Rail have in Milton Keynes, obviously this is a classic case of like male ego empire building, so it has to be totally different from what went before, so there's going to be a new HQ, which is fine. I don't mind there being a new planned HQ, but it shouldn't be a competition. It should be a process by which we work out where the most sensible place for there to be headquarters is, and then we make it happen there. Anyway, it's all right, George, you don't have to comment. You can remain lip sealed.
No, I quite like to, actually. I think it also makes the mistake of pinning too much on an HQ. I mean, if you look at other departments that are modernising across Whitehall, they have an awful lot of well-placed satellite and important satellite locations where they run various functions and use the local population there, to provide work there and to get the best out of that part of the country. I think pinning an HQ, it's distracting, and I just don't think it's the most important thing right now. I'd also argue that if you're going to have anywhere where the bigwigs sit, it probably does need to be close to the source of power. I mean, the railways are an enormous expense for the Treasury, and a massive sort of political football, if you like, and need to be near Westminster, near Whitehall. So this is obviously a silly way to choose a location for anything, let alone something very important for the future of the country. Let's see where it goes.
Cannot disagree with any of that. Yep. Yeah. Well, this is going to be fun. Free and frank George is here, everyone. Good stuff. Right? Yeah, no, fully agree. It's just doolally for, as you say, something so critically important. It also, I find it's almost mocking, given that the rail industry has been in stasis since basically the middle of Control Period 5. So 2017 or whatever. We've been in like horrible stasis since then, with not really much. Yeah, like not really much confidence in what's going on. Waiting for the Williams review, waiting for William. Then it was Williams Shaps. Now we're in stasis, waiting for the IRP. That's going to be delayed. HS2, will they, won't they? All this delay, all this lack of confidence in the industry, and we'll get to why this is critical momentarily. I'm sure we'll talk about it a bit. All this delay and umming and ahhing. It's a bit of a mockery to then say, oh, look at this, great, we're deciding where the HQ is going to be. Isn't it wonderful? And it's going to be a competition. It's like, we don't want more, like, uncertainty. We don't want more, like, levelling up agenda politics.
We'd like the experts to tell us where the best place is. This is where we want to put confidence into the industry, not saying we don't have a clue, so let's run a competition and a vote.
It's just, we don't want more. We want the industry needs confidence so that it can be the right size, so that it can employ and grow skills, employ the right people to solve the big questions, to answer the exam question. We can't answer the exam question if we can't employ the right people to pick up the pencils. Anyway, right.
Rant over.
Yes. Well, rant over for now, but I fear that the rest of the episode might well be more of that. Right. So, happier news. It is Railweek. It is Railweek. So, I'm going to go back to the big faces, actually, in this news article, because, George, tell us what's been happening with Railweek so far. We are 2/3 of the way through Well, no, that's not true. 3/5 of the way through Railweek. How's it going?
Yeah, it seems like a strange time during Railweek to be promoting it in the middle of it. Yeah. Hey, but, better late than never. And thanks for having me on to do so. Obviously, this happens every year, and Rail Week is just a very focused week of what young rail professionals and all of our supporters and corporate supporters and members do throughout the whole year. So what we've been doing this week is exactly what you can find us doing every other week. It's just we want to focus, the national interest, get a bit of press out there, 1 week a year in particular. And look, we've got a really cool pink colour scheme. To really draw the eye and of course show our diversity. It's not orange, and so anyway, so that's Rail Week. So this week we've had careers fairs up and down the country. We've got a webinar event every single evening. We had a tour around the Network Rail Euston site today. There are other depot tours going on in the week. let me see. Say I'm going to my website. We've got a really high demand for an event tonight, which is probably clashing with this. If you've got numbers a little lower than usual, from the RSSB on rail safety, and usually when we put a safety event on, it's one of the lower turnouts. But this one appears to really have caught people's interest. So
interesting. Okay. Yeah.
That'll be on YouTube. All of our webinar stuff, for those who don't know, I mean, this audience probably does, gets uploaded onto YouTube, so to make it as accessible as possible. If you're interested in what we're doing this week, if you're interested in being part of Railweek in the future, and also just accessing a lot of materials and advice, which we're going to be talking the whole raison d'etre this evening, go onto the railweek.com website and you can get much more information.
And it's a huge string of events, and the good thing is it's quite it flexes and changes depending on who's getting stuck in and who's getting involved each year. So it's quite a vibrant week of events. You're right. I need to do a better job of pre-plugging it. For some reason, I pre-plug it as in the week before because it's the Rail Week. But actually, I need to do a better job of pre-plugging Rail Week like a month in advance. And actually, perhaps there should be like a Rail Week section in there. There probably should be a bit of a discussion in the Discord server about Railweek in advance of it. But more on that later. Simon, you're on the Discord server. You can get stuck in on that front. Anyway, right. So, indeed, we have. I'll go back to our non-faces. So that the Railweek, and more about Railweek later. More about what events are to come later in the week, towards the end of the episode. But really, without further ado, I need to basically tell everyone that it's that we're kicking off, and to welcome everyone to tonight's Rail Natter. And as the lovely Intercity 225 and its glorious swallow livery fade away, we actually bring up the title card from the episode 1 year ago when we had Harriet joining us. Harriet Glen joined us to talk exactly about what we're going to be talking about, although with perhaps a slightly different angle. So I'm going to bring George back up in the corner there. And so last year, episode 30, confusingly the 31st episode of Rail Natter, we had the first of this sort of what is now going to become an annual running, essentially, measure of how successfully the industry is coping with the skills gap, which was talking about the skills gap for Railweek, and I think it's something that I'm incredibly passionate about, which is why I think it's worth dedicating an annual episode to look at it, to review it, to speak to someone who's kind of got a reasonably... George, you're an excellent person to talk about this, hence why we have you on, for this year. Skills Gap, what Skills Gap, round 2. The reason you're an excellent voice in this is because you, through being the chair of the national chair of YRP, and through you kind of dealing with the kind of the companies, and YRP sits right across not just engineering but right across every organisation that can work in the rail industry. People kind of come and get involved in young rail professionals, and so. Every year, I think it'd be good to get someone in to talk, to talk about this or their feelings. And so this year, George, it's a pleasure to have you along. On which note, mm-hmm. I'd quite like if you could tell us all a bit about yourself and what you do. So I'm going to put this image up in the background, and you don't have to mention or allude to this, but you're welcome to if you wish to. George, tell us what you do in your day job, and then a bit about your role, and also, given that it's a skills episode, tell us a bit about what your kind of pathway into the rail industry was.
Sure. Well, you've set me right up there with that picture of a very exciting constructed site on a station that people on this video will almost certainly recognise, and maybe not love so much, but we're trying to do something about that. So I am the station sponsor for Euston for High Speed 2 Limited. Nobody, I think, outside of sponsorship really understands what a sponsor does. Yeah. I'm still trying to work it out myself. But the way I always describe it is we're responsible for requirements going that way from the client into the project with the flow of money, and then assurances that the client's getting what they want going in the other direction, and maybe with some controls and authority and things along the way. But essentially what it means is I am the proxy client helping the Department for Transport try and work out what it wants to do with Euston Station, and try to make sure that the team there that are running the £2.5 billion project within HS2 have all of the authority that they need from Treasury, from Cabinet Office, and all of the various restrictions and constraints placed on the project to move forward. So I'm really in the middle of a flow of information into government about the project, and then back in maybe not quite as strong a flow from government into HS2, because as many people know, it's been plagued with some complexity, some real difficulties in trade-offs. Clearly, it's a highly constrained site. There's an existing, very busy London terminus, of which, as you can see, we've started there in that picture, which I must say is quite out of date.
I was getting on a bit. This is, you know what? I should try. While you keep explaining, I'm going on to the HS2 Twitter account to see if they've put any more recent ones up. So talk amongst yourselves.
So you can see already there's the conventional stations being dismantled there. You can see platforms 17 and 18, the roof, the train shed, the parcel deck, so forth, being taken back. That's actually now happened, and all of 17 and 18 is open to the atmosphere, and that in itself, presents a mighty challenge when you're trying to build a new station. The rate at which you take away those platforms, those passenger services, you impact the existing station, and that's always being traded off with that end state benefit. You're building a railway for 100 years. That the revenue that the government, that the Treasury is going to get back. So every day of delay is another day of not taking those revenues and passenger impact. Mixed in with that, of course, you've got the vibrant local community of the London Borough of Camden, highly populated, one of the poorer boroughs, and so regeneration is really important for the Borough of Camden. We're being incredibly disruptive with this project. You can only see one bit of the construction site in Camden here. Of course, it extends right out towards what is north or the left of the picture, up at the approaches. And so it's really important for Camden that we actually bring some benefit for the people that are sort of suffering our disruption for quite an extended period of time. And if you think about the redevelopment of the Network Rail Station, which is don't
worry about that. That's fine. I'm doing things in the background, everyone. You can hear chaos going on. It's fine. It's worth it. I promise.
If you think about the Network Rail Station, which has plans for redevelopment over the subsequent years, perhaps concurrently with the HS2 station, TBC, you've got a very long period of disruption. Add into that the fact that it's a central node of the TfL bus network, not a network I'm particularly familiar with, other than it makes doing work at the front of the station really, really difficult. Rerouting those buses and all the delays and impacts that has. It's a highly contentious, visible part of the HS2 network, and a fantastic opportunity to be involved for me, but never an easy day. I do smile when I think that I think when I joined the project a couple of years ago, I think we were further on in the design than where we've actually ended up recently.
I mean, it's true that you've got to get the design right before you really get stuck into the site, but there are when you've got the challenges, particularly with George Cavier's, particularly when Lend-Lease are getting excitable about oversight development. Lots of and also it being a political football, this idea that we need to save a few $100 million on a project that is, 88 billion plus. It's a bit doolally when you're talking about constraining, But anyway, you know all this. It's that umming and ahhing that's critical. Forget what the ultimate outcome is. If it is going to be 10 platforms, that's going to be a real problem. But at least let's just agree that and get on with it and get building the thing. Otherwise, it's going to be 0 platforms for quite a lot longer than people would like it to be. So, yeah.
I couldn't agree more. And look, this month, the 6 monthly parliamentary report is coming out on HS2. So that's our opportunity to draw a line in the sand for that. I mean, I know where it's headed, but I can't say until the Minister writes to Parliament. At that point, like you say, we've got a baseline. There is a lot of work going on in the background. The future is bright for the station design. There's some really cool things about it. It's going to be an amazing railway station, and the fact that it's right next to another huge station, it's going to be a kind of St Pancras King's Cross hybrid. This awesome little node for transport that's going to see many thousands, tens of thousands of people every day using the station. So yeah.
Before you talk about what your pathway was, and as people will have heard / seen as I chaotically made it happen in the background, these shows are always improvised. I have here's one I did earlier. We've nicked a video which should, and you can correct anything that's not quite up to date. But this video seems fairly recent. It's from HS2 about Euston. So for anyone who is interested in Euston, here's a video. So here's I turn the music off. So this is hopefully a bit more recent.
It is much more. So you can see the open space there, where platform 17 and 18 have gone.
Yeah. Oh yeah, they've gone there. So you can see them. They've been nabbed.
Yeah. The power signal box, which has just disappeared on the left, that's gone now.
This is all very snazzy. You know what? Oh golly. You know what? Let's flick back and just pause when it zooms in, because that'll be easier. So when I go. When that disappears, is it going to disappear? Right, let's pause there. Okay, right there.
Yeah.
So the old power signal box, which is here.
Yeah, that's gone.
That's gone.
The tent, big white thing. Yep, that was for the last of the exhumations. So people will probably know that the.
Oh, we briefly lost you, George. Someone switched your Wi-Fi router off. Oh, we might have lost George. We'll get George back momentarily, I'm sure.
James is done and re-interned.
Oh, we've got you back, George. Don't worry, we've got you back. Sorry, yes, it was. You're getting rid of all the people, the burial, and then putting people back elsewhere.
So that's the last of that job. And the site hasn't moved on that much. I would say that the new vent shaft for the TfL substation, which is under where it says terminus.
Oh yeah, just
that's
kind of
being done.
There. Yeah.
Yep. There's a big temporary structure there to allow them to dig right down.
Oh, yeah,
there you can see it. There you are. That's the head house.
That's it. Nice.
Yep.
Lovely.
That dig is complete down to as deep as it's going to go, and now they've broken out and they're working their way towards the Royal GPs, College of Royal GPs, which is towards the bottom left corner.
So that's where so that was one of the challenges with the old very nice, the tube station that's there, that's famously being pulled apart. I think, and you can maybe correct me on that, I think the bits are being used to go. I mean, that thing, it's not going to be rebuilt elsewhere. It's going to be used to repair. I think the bits are going to be used to repair other similar era stations. Is that right? What
I do know is that I sound like a politician then. What I do know is that the tiles will not be thrown away.
Yeah.
The period items will be stored for, like you say, either cladding a new bit of infrastructure that needs a bit of a vintage look to fit in, or repairing some of the listed properties. Yeah.
But the challenge with that going is that there is still infrastructure that needs to be there for the underground, hence the construction of the vent shaft and the work that you can see in the little tent there. I know we've gone off on one about Euston, but it is quite interesting because it's such an enormous, it's an absolutely enormous...
I'd be happy to talk about it for hours. I mean, it really is a fascinating place. And look, with all of the delays and the frustration over scope going on and the rumbling on in the background, we're getting on with a really challenging site. There used to be 2 hotels there. There was a whole raft of corporate structures that have been, office blocks and things that have been pulled down. And there's almost a brownfield site ready for us to build this incredible new station.
Indeed, it's exciting. I like that it showed. There's a lot of light shown in these, and kind of skylights shown in these. I'm interested to know to what extent that manifests itself in reality, but we'll get there. It's fine.
When you stick some tower blocks on top, I'm not sure how much light will make its way down, but I think that's the aspiration.
Yeah, we'll see. And it can work. Buried stations can work, but the thing that makes them work is by having high ceilings and not having Lend-Lease squeeze how much ceiling you have. Because it can work if you've got loads and loads of room above and it feels spacious and doesn't feel claustrophobic. Anyway, right, so there we go. That's that, and there's the site, and it's enormous, and you can just see the scale. You can see the scale, actually. That's a nice shot, because you can see that it doesn't just end, it continues going quite a lot further up. It is a spectacular site. I actually walked it. I can't remember why. I ended up walking right the way round and up to sort of just get a feel for it, and then back to the big cigarette building that's there, and then back round just to kind of get a feel for the scale. And I was walking for like an hour and a half. This is massive, absolutely massive. Oh, anyway, right. So while that it disappears off and then the HS2 logo appears, actually, you know what? Let's go big faces because, George, how did you get into? It's a slightly different pathway to mine. You know, you're not a civil engineer. You came up as a mechanical and electrical background. I think that's right.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So yeah, tell us about your pathway into engineering. Well, into the railways rather.
So I wanted to be an engineer, but I didn't know what sort of engineer. So I chose two types of engineering, mechanical and electrical. So I did, or electronic, I should say. So I did an integrated degree. Yeah. So it's about control systems, which actually apply quite well to trains. You know, motors, power generation, control, communications, information, data, and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it's quite a generalist degree. When I finished, I didn't actually want to go and do any work at all. I wanted to go to Australia and have some fun.
Oh, really?
So I went to Australia and managed to do a month of traveling before I ran out of money, and then had to get a job. So I fell into I know I didn't do it very well.
Nice.
I fell into a job at Macquarie University. They had a shortage of lecturers, and so I became an academic tutor for a year, teaching basically what I just learned, which was an amazing experience. And a great way to experience a country, if I can recommend one, is go and get chummy with the university, because you get people from all over the country and they're all very happy to have you, and you become their new best friend, and it's great. So yeah, I got back from Australia, needed a job, was looking for engineering jobs, and what was then Parsons Brinckerhoff and is now WSP UK had a systems engineering job in rail, and that's how I started rail.
It's there you go. So interesting that you've also done a bit of teaching. I think it's difficult to say everyone should do teaching because that just doesn't work like that. But having a teaching role or getting involved in actually educating, or indeed not just broadly talking about skills, but say being a mentor for an apprentice or a graduate is a really great way to become a better engineer, or not just engineering, but a better whatever it is that you happen to do. It's really good for growing your own skills. The idea that those who can't do teach, that phrase is stupid and makes no sense whatsoever, because if you teach, you really have to know what you're talking about, because you will get asked a question or you will get asked about something in a way that you've never thought of before, and if you don't know your onions, you'll be stumped. So yeah, it's interesting that you've also done a bit of teaching. Cool. So basically that's your route in. So through WSP and then so from WSP kind of hopped over to. Are you seconded into HS2? This is no one cares about this in the chat, but you are.
No, I went to the Department for Transport. I think I might go down history as the shortest career in the civil service. I think I managed 16 months
Really?
Working at the DFT. Yeah, which look, I loved my time there. I did. But I quickly realised I wanted to be much closer to the project. I wanted to stay working with government. I think my skills, communication skills, and kind of jack of all trades, master of none, not humble brag, really suit me to working with basically people who don't know what they're talking about, but really need to. The vast majority of the civil service, they're generalists who are, have great responsibility for spending vast amounts of taxpayers' money, and I love being in a position to help them do that in the best way possible. So it made sense. I went over to sponsorship in HS2, and yeah, haven't looked back.
Nice. So from your career to going back to YRP, because it's always useful to talk about give people an introduction to what YRP is, because it's not. Some people occasionally confuse it with being it's an alternative to one of the professional institutions. It's not. It's a very different organisation. So we've got a few slides. So this is the YRP logo, everyone. There you are. Look at it. It's nice. Here's the YRP logo. But I suppose it's probably best to just pop these bits on for you to talk about what YRP is and a little bit about what it's about and why it exists and a little bit a bit of background for people who perhaps aren't familiar with YRP.
Yeah, certainly. Okay, so I think we're going to talk a little bit about the problem statement that we're here to address, essentially the skills shortage in rail. But there's more to YRP than that sort of very serious agenda. YRP was set up 12 years ago by 4 founders who basically wanted a place for young and early career professionals in rail to get together, to collaborate, to network, to develop, because the rail industry is dominated outside of work, I think, by our big institutions. And 12 years ago, the rail industry had an awful lot of modernising to do. It's come on a long way. But in terms of diversity and promoting that diversity, getting together and actually going out into the world to try and address the skills shortage, and also looking internally and putting a real focus on its young leaders of the future. I say young, not just young, of course, early career professionals, people moving into the industry, bringing with them their experiences from other places, and then ensuring that the right systems, the right structures are in place to get the best out of those young people as quickly as possible. Because the industry, let's face it, we're going to come on to this, the industry needs to sort out its productivity. It needs to sort out its bloating workforce costs to remain sustainable for the future. So that's kind of why the thing was started. So there are three main things that you can see on the screen that we do. So promotion is about that, looking internal. It's about celebrating the work of our young people and their contribution to the industry. Inspiring is about going outside of the industry and changing the mentality of how people see rail, rather than just a set of sliding doors or that sinking feeling when the train's late, or even that the workforce is really a bunch of old men in orange outfits, and that's all there is. But that, or a tails and a top hat, of course.
Yeah, quite.
And then developing is about putting in place the professional development systems and structures for young people and early career professionals to bloom, really.
And I think it's worth kind of momentarily just pausing on that last feature, because it's something that yes, the professional institutions to an extent facilitate, but this is where YRP kind of has a bit of a unique role. Obviously we need. It's interesting you talk about bloating workforce costs. That is an issue. It's an issue because there are so few of us that our rates per person and lots of critical resources are higher than they necessarily need to be. But we also need to be growing as a workforce. But part of also that is that's not the only thing though. And part of it is we talk about having the right people in the right place. And quite a lot of people who are in the rail industry aren't necessarily, they might well be in the rail industry, but they're not necessarily in the right place. And so one of the things I think YRP facilitates fantastically is the networking element, not just for career forwarding, but also for people finding out roles that they may either didn't know existed or didn't know they could access, and then being able to get into those roles in a way that wouldn't have, they meet people, they can create those contacts so they can get into a role where they really do feel like they have found their calling. And in doing that, they are able to be, more productive, have a more fulfilled career, and achieve, and push us towards, a railway network that ultimately that is functioning better.
Yep, so I couldn't agree more. I've seen it many, many times. Colleagues at YRP, they've met somebody, an opportunity's arisen, they've got that connection, they're interested, they feel like they're in a space where they can ask open questions. It's not a one-way recruitment process because they know someone on the inside. I've just got somebody. I'd like to think that my support just got somebody, a place in HS2 that they wanted. So it shows it works. And of course, the skills that you get at YRP, either just through engaging with events, so networking, going to a webinar, something like this, learning those sort of less tangible things that really broaden your horizons. But then actually being a part of YRP on the committee, taking on a leadership role, having ownership for a certain thing. People at the start of their careers, you just don't get those opportunities for 2 or 3 years. And then actually that's quite frustrating for a lot of people. And we can't afford for those brilliant types and, for basically anybody not to be fulfilling their potential as quickly as possible.
Absolutely. It's one of those things that, in the past, we've changed. This is partly a generational thing in that we, unlike previous generations, unlike people who, for example, were on the British Rail grad scheme, of which we've had, I'll point out, a few actually who have been on RailNatter because so many people in the rail industry went through that process, which was a fantastic grad scheme. It was fantastic, and the railway almost could do with something replicating that. However, generationally, millennials and definitely Gen Z are not, we're not ones to sit on our hands for 3 years, sort of running through a grad scheme. And actually, we're quite keen, particularly people younger than you and I, actually, George, quite keen to get into a role that they really feel fits them quite quickly, and that's something that actually isn't necessarily well facilitated by the kind of the rigid structure pathways. And when YRP offers a chance to sort of skip past that, get around that, find your way into a role, and indeed hear about roles that you aren't aware of that really fit better. And it's another thing that, yes, we can fairly easily access good, high-quality sort of seminars and things to expand our knowledge within our discipline, and maybe even adjacent disciplines. So engineering-wise, I can get access to civil engineering, electrical or kind of electromechanical engineering stuff quite easily. It's much harder for me to get access to some of the customer-facing stuff and understand how that part of the industry works. It's harder for me to understand the finance world. It's harder for me to have chats with civil servants to understand what their demands are and what they're kind of looking for. And people, so again, YRP facilitates that, and I think it's really great that it does. So sorry, we've gone off on one again, but I think it's worth pointing out. But a lot of people query what the point of YRP is, and I think some of it's really important to kind of have that explain why it has that value. Talking of values, George, take it away at the next part of this slide.
Well, I don't think I really need to go through these. They've been on the screen. I mean, they're
say the word fun out loud, George. Say it.
Well, look, it's important. I was at a conference last week talking to apprentices, and I said, "What's the best thing about being an apprentice?" And of course, everyone was really embarrassed and quiet and didn't say anything. And I said, "Well, it's certainly not the salary." Because that's what comes later in your career, stress and salary. The best thing about this point of your career is that you can learn, make mistakes, and actually enjoy it. I mean, truly, I remember when I started in the industry and I was just learning about all these things. I was getting excited about things like ETCS. Now the thought just sort of makes me groan and think, oh God, what a difficult thing to get your head around. But at the time I was like, give me the manuals,
Yeah.
So that's look. And the other great thing about YRP that kind of loops all of that stuff in is you can make as little or as much of it as you want.
Yeah.
You mentioned with Railweek, it's very organic. Every year, the type of events and how it's run really depends on the skill set of the people who've got involved. Some years will be bigger than others. Some years will be louder than others. Some years will have more high-quality content. But with YRP, you can dip in as little or as much as you want.
Absolutely. Now, I'm going to press this button because just for anyone, people are talking about YRP and sort of the general things that that YRP organise and things. We'll come to some of the events that YRP organise in a moment, but it's just worth very briefly talking about how YRP is accessible. Actually, this is one of my criticisms of YRP, and they're getting better, but it was always very, and you're wincing because you know exactly what I'm about to say, which is that it's always been very London-focused, and that's something that everyone being involved in YRP tries to break down, but it's almost like a consequence of the fact that the industry continues to be quite London-focused, and that. So anyway, on that one, having dropped you in it there, you can talk a bit about regional structure.
So look, the whole point of the regions was to try and get away from that. Look, there's got to be a centre because we're a small team of volunteers.
Yeah, exactly.
We have to manage basically the finances, the legal responsibilities of the business. And yes, that is, and I think for the foreseeable future, going to be based in London. But the work we do in London is a fraction of how important what the regions do. And the regions are active and massive. They have, that's where the majority of the events happen. And there's an awful lot of committee activity in the regions doing the real YRP stuff. Almost what I've put up here isn't very fair because it makes it appear like the stuff on the right is more important, but it really isn't. And look, when I became chair last year, this is my second year, I set up a head of regions role, head of initiatives, and a head of external accounts, and we expanded the chair's office into this exec that tried to take the focus off of that kind of business focus in the southeast and say, right, how are we making decisions? How are we making YRP work for all of the initiatives we put on? And most importantly, how are the regions then represented?
Absolutely. Simon, just before I forget to say it, this is entirely, well, it's not irrelevant, but membership is free, everyone. Just going to shout that just before either of us forget to say it. It's free. It's free. Anyway, sorry. Also noting, there's Bonnie Prize. We had Bonnie on talking about Christmas stuff over Christmas, actually. Good fun hearing from Bonnie.
And look, I think I deserve an announcement. Fee and Bonnie were up for Women in Rail Awards last week. Bonnie won Inspirational Woman of the Year award. So congrats to Bonnie. Fantastic. Yeah. And this is the first year that we've had a gender, would you say, not neutral, equal gender
like
split.
A reasonable gender split, like a 50-50 gender split, right?
Yeah, 50-50, absolutely. Which is a great achievement in the chair's office. So that the directors of YRP finally are
I was going to say
equal men and women.
that's not the case on what we can see on screen, but it's that the broader sort of looking across the regions as well.
Actually, across the regions, we have pretty good diversity. It's certainly industry beating. But the chair's office, who are the top four there, sorry, it's not very clear.
I see what you mean. Yeah, got you.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah, there we go. It's fantastic. Well, it's doing a
Practice
better job
what
of.
you
I mean,
preach.
you have to lead by example, and so if YRP is being more representative of the industry, that's how it should be, because people need to be able to see that is what we should be aspiring to. It's not a case of going, well, the industry's kind of, 1 in 10 is of the people employed are women, so it's important to lead by example. So yeah, really good stuff. So to answer the what are the events question, well, all manner of. George, I mean, here are some pictures.
Here are some pictures. I mean, here are some pretty exciting pictures doing the stuff we really love doing. We've got Heritage Railway work that we do. That's at Festiniog, I think, on the top left.
Excuse me.
We've got the annual dinner in the middle. We do that every April. We've had to miss 2 because of COVID, so we're really excited about next April. People are going to be exploding before they get there with, the anticipation of what they've been waiting for 2 years. The next one is our webinar on networking and development work. There's Mohanid there, I think, during Railweek last year, potentially the year. No, it would have been the year before because of COVID. Talking to a bunch of people. Then we've got our Young Rail Tours division. That's taken from the trip to Japan, probably guessed. Then we've got Railweek, what we're talking about today. Doesn't need any more explanation. And then we do loads of feel-good stuff that's good for the soul and also good for the people who need our help. So that's our Railway Children affiliation there. That's our primary charity of choice.
Excellent. And so I just realised I was talking about how quickly RailNatter goes, right? And it's currently 1947. And, good grief. So, right, I'm going to briefly hide our faces. And also I'm going to very briefly I'm not going to dwell long on this slide. This is the slide that we put up when Harriet and I were talking about the skills gap a year ago. And this graphic is quite an old graphic. And so I'm just going to pop it on screen. I'm not going to draw attention to anything other than the fact that the numbers of the shortfall of skills is into the hundreds of thousands of people. And this sort of kind of infographic breaks down some of those challenges and where those challenges lie. And I think what you've given a kind of quite a nice specific breakdown that I think we're going to go, if I bring your miniaturized face back, quite a nice breakdown that I think we're going to go through, and we'll find out whether, So essentially I thought we'd go through each of these in turn very kind of reasonably briefly and highlight some of those issues. So only 60, we talked about the fact that it's about 1 in 10 people are women in the rail industry, and that that is the case. 16% of the current workforce are women.
I mean, can I just interrupt you, because I read something the other day. It was the chair of the Transport Select Committee, Hugh Merriman, was commenting on how irresponsible he thought that the haulage industry was for its inability to modernise, and then turning to the government and blaming it when it's wage suppression that kept people out of working there, and the fact that less than 1% of the haulage workforce is female. And it's a really great illustration, actually, of how fragile you can make a workforce if you try and draw 99% of a workforce from only half of the population. We've got to remember that if you're going to fix a skill shortage, aside from diversity being a good thing, we're just talking about numbers and facts. You need to open up half of your workforce to half of the population in the country. Done.
It is exactly. It's as simple as that. Right. So we talked about kind of the gender split. Then we're now going to talk about age. So the average age of the railway industry workforce is 43, which is better than it used to be, but it still means twice as many people will retire than average for other sectors.
Yep. Well, look. There's a good story in this and a bad. If the average age is old, it means we're doing good things like retaining people, that it's a career for life. These are quite positive ways. There are ways to turn this around for people starting their careers. But yeah, it shows that we are not bringing in enough young people, and that, like as you say, there's a pressure. There's a pressure that when those people start to retire, we're going to have a huge gap.
And it's the skill. It's not just the case that we're losing those people. certainly the case within like engineering and technical skills within the industry, which is obviously something that I'm kind of more closely seated within. It's that skills transfer. If you're losing huge swathes of people that were brought in an intake, 30, 40 years ago, indeed through the last tranches of the BR grad scheme, then there was a huge vacuum in employment. That means there's a huge number of people going to retire without there being a steady flow of skills. And it's a real problem. So on to the next point. We've alluded to this. It's not about reducing the overall number. Actually, we need to increase the number of people who are employed, and it's about getting rid of wage inflation. What George and I are saying is we're quite happy to be paid less if it means that we we have a less stressful life because we're not having to do so much overtime. Wage inflation. Talk a little bit about that, George.
Well, I mean, wage inflation is a natural economic result, like you say, of there being a skills shortage. If you can't fill the role, you have to make it more attractive to get people out of other sectors and into your particular role, which has the demand and the funding to cover it, and that manifests as wage inflation. And to young people starting in rail, it's great that the rail salaries are as competitive as they are. But that's not sustainable. It should be as important to people starting their careers in an industry that industry is sustainable and could be seen as that as a serious component of the future of the nation, i.e., an affordable and productive one, as those salaries. Otherwise, you get paid really well for 3 years and then the project will collapse and lose funding because Treasury will walk away. So it's a serious issue.
Yeah, absolutely. And it also means that fundamentally we're not, like, if we take a bigger picture stance, the rail capacity needs to double by 2050, right? That means we need to be delivering a hang of a lot more projects than we are in a year. A huge amount more output needs to be happening annually. And wage inflation is actually limiting how much we can achieve. Not just in sort of explicit, money is not the issue. This episode is about the fact it's the skills. Treasury could write a blank check tomorrow, much as it'd be lovely if they did, and we'd be delivering at about the rate we are now because we have that skills shortage, and so it kind of plays into that fact. So we talk about EU workforce. So I have personal experience of this. This is the workforce loss through the fact that we've lost a lot of EU workers, particularly in terms of frontline construction roles, but also in design and in other parts. So this is critical, and I've seen this in our office. We've lost a lot of people through Britain being quite a hostile place to work at the moment if you're an EU citizen. So George, yep. I don't know if you've got anything else to sort of add to that one.
I mean, I don't have much to add to this, except it just makes our job harder.
And it's also frustrating because this is a bit of a segue. It's frustrating because we're losing some of those, diversity of experiences is really critical in solving problems better. And this is why we need more women. This is why we need more people of colour. This is why we need more people from LGBT backgrounds. This is why we need disabled people to be coming in as whether it's engineers, frontline staff, whatever it happens to be, because that diversity of thought allows us to solve problems better. And it's the same for people from different countries with different processes and approaches. So yeah, this is also a bit of a problem, and it's a challenge we've got to try and tackle. And actually, we need to be attracting those people back. Actually, so it's possibly about making the British rail industry attractive for people to come back here and deal with all that stupid paperwork and actually still want to come and work here. So this is an interesting one. We've alluded to this. More activities in the south, but it is nudging north slowly. Yeah, that's true.
Yep. I mean, the Treasury have just rewritten the Green Book to try and get away from that southeast skew towards the value of an investment. So that's very positive. You hear Boris talking about building back better and investment in the north. I don't know if you looked at the health of the eastern leg, you might think the same. But what frustrates me is that the Treasury does not work by cancel one project, transfer money to another. So it's always a bad thing when you see good investment being turned down. Never believe the story that it's because it's going somewhere else. Absolutely. That's just not how national
that money is evaporating. And yes. What's happening is that all those people that were going to be paid to make that thing appear aren't paying, and the companies, all of them are not paying their tax, which in turn, even by current neoliberal financial framing, this doesn't require you to believe in any sort of newer economic theories. Even by the old neoliberal Thatcherite rules, that means that you have less daily revenue to be spending on this stuff like, other projects or schools or the NHS or what have you. So yeah, it's always bad when when projects give way. It's not good. So anyway, yeah, that's somewhat of a segue. But the point is that these more projects in the north don't need to be at the expense of projects in the south. It's just that there needs to be some catch up regionally, and actually particularly with the eastern leg. The East Midlands once again gets forgotten. But anyway, that's a bit of a segue. Right, so this is interesting, and I'd like you to explore this one a little bit more. So nearly 40% of the workforce are level 2, which means they're semi-skilled in kind of government taxonomy. Talk a bit more about this, George, because explain this one to us.
So I should come in here and say thank you very much to the National Skills Academy for Rail, from whom I pinched things.
Okay, I see where you're coming with this.
And then to say that when you pinch things to make yourself look clever, sometimes you don't know what all of it means. Now, what I do understand is that there are different levels for training, and that's the national way of establishing the level of education.
So is this so now this is where I get old. This is where, despite being in education and being in further education, or was certainly, I basically made a point of avoiding worrying too much about like NVQ levels, but this is to do with skills level NVQ levels and sort of level 2. So level 3 is like degree level 2 is below degree level. I think.
So level 2, I've got it here. Level 2 is like top GCSE grades.
Yeah.
Music grades 4 and 5. Level 3, you've got A levels, AS levels. Level 3 diploma, that doesn't really help. Level 4, you've got HNC. Level 5 is HND. Level 6 is degree, apprenticeship, degree with honours. Level 7 is masters. Level 8 is doctor. There you go.
So that's about professional. That's partly what, to me, I see that as being professionalisation in the industry is supporting people to actually do the training they need. So that means that we have an industry that potentially hasn't received the training that it needs to be achieving what it's doing. So it also shows how little I remember about my MVQ levels because nailed it. But so that's a key thing. Again, it's skills training. Are we providing the chance for our workforce to be doing the training it needs to do? And then I think this is the last one. This is interesting.
Yeah,
and I think it relates to the previous one quite
favourite.
Nicely.
Yeah.
Only 16% of supervisors are actually trained in management.
Yep. This, to me, when I read it, was both the most shocking and least shocking, because my experience and the experience of lots of people I've spoken to in YRP is that their managers are great or can be very good at managing projects, the money, the technical side of things. But actually, when it comes to being a good manager of them and providing the support that they need, they often go elsewhere for mentorship and for that support, and often come to YRP when we get lots of people who simply aren't being managed properly within their organisation. And this directly feeds into the productivity issue. I think I wrote an article for Rail Staff last month talking about how we can try and get more out of people for the same amount of effort. And having a line manager that takes their role seriously in ensuring you've got the support, the guidance, the opportunities, doing all the things that you can't do yet to further yourself is essential.
Absolutely. And it's, if people aren't feeling like if people aren't having their progress kind of fed back to them, aren't having, an understanding of what they're achieving, aren't feeling like they have the support perhaps for mental health issues or home issues or training, all these issues that a good line manager, who ideally is a trained person in managing people, if you don't have that, then it can be a pretty daunting. I know quite a few engineers who have either changed company regularly or indeed have left engineering altogether, and this is just engineering, have left engineering altogether as a result of dismal line management, and not having people who can lead other people properly. It's critical. It's absolutely critical. And so we've got all of these points, all these challenges, conscious of time. We've got all of these challenges, but what can we do? What on earth can we do about it? And indeed, what can others do about it? What are the responsibilities? Last time we talked about the fact that a lot of responsibility lies with government in setting a path for the industry, but what can we do about it? And I suppose I was expecting us to have like half an hour of open discussion on this, but it's 1959. So I suppose more broad themes and thoughts, George. And then we've got a few questions coming in. So this is the point, everyone, for you to send your queries and questions in. And make sure you at me in, because then my name appears in red, everyone, and I can pick up those questions. But send those questions in. George, kind of, what can we do then? What as you see it, what are some of the headline things we need to be doing to kind of resolve some of that?
So, I mean, we can take this offline and do a separate thing, Gareth. If people are interested, we could put a YRP event together to talk this through. It seems a shame to have run out of time to.
And we definitely should actually. I'd be up for that.
But broadly, look, the corporate support that YRP gets shows that businesses are still, they recognise the issue. I mean, education of the employers is really important. There are those repeat employers who invest in YRP, invest in their CSR, and there are those that sort of have lip service to their employees who don't take responsibility for solving these issues. And solving those issues means reacting to the needs of their workforce, looking forward and investing in their future. And a lot of that, you already alluded to the certainty that the industry needs from government. That is a big part of it. To speak RIA language, Rail Industry Association language, the enemy of boom and bust.
Yes, absolutely.
So that if government can provide a strong roadmap, businesses then have got some confidence and they can take some responsibility for the future of their workforce. That's a good start.
Absolutely, it's having that consistency and that stability, and we loop right back round to the thing both of us were grumbling about at the start, which is that lack of confidence that the industry has meant that everything is in panic mode, and panic mode means you're not doing training, you're not necessarily recruiting, you're not paying attention to the needs of your staff long term. You're in panic mode. Everyone is panicking, jumping onto job codes, working on different things, desperately trying to keep head above water, and that is not a way to grow a stable, skilled workforce and happy people working for an industry across the board. The lack of certainty that people have in the train operating companies about what's happening, about staffing on that front. It's not just engineering, it's not just the back of house stuff. Mm-hmm. People across the board, planners, operational planners, signallers. You're talking about all the people who work in things like branding and things like ticketing. Like, what's happening with that? They want to know what's happening with GBR so that they know what they can be doing going forward, so that we can grow those skills across the board. Absolutely, that really is the key thing. So we've had a few questions that have popped up actually. And it's a bit of an open session, so they might not be specifically relevant to what we're talking about. But Mike Wooldridge has asked an interesting question. Before he tries to join, is YRP aimed only at those of a certain younger age, or is this relevant to those of us who are slightly older but still younger in the industry? You kind of answered it earlier, George, but maybe you want to address it head on again.
Yeah, I did. And to be totally clear, it is for everybody. You could have been in the industry 50 years, be a professor and be a member of YRP, because that we are there to help people network and develop. If you think you can get benefit from the services that we offer, you're absolutely welcome. There is absolutely no limit, no discrimination. And if you do have a bit more experience or experience from other industries, get involved and get involved with the committee and take part in actually putting some events together and giving something back. I mean, although I absolutely can still get masses of benefit from all of the YRP events that are being published and go to these events, I might not choose to, because I'm less at the stage of my career now where I need that breadth or have time to get that breadth. But I can still pick and choose things that are interesting and get something out of it. And now I'm giving back by doing things like this and being chairman, and you get just as many new soft skills from doing that.
Absolutely. So we had Ignored Ambience further up was making a point saying that they get the feeling that line management is generally poor throughout most employment, though maybe not as low as 16%. Yeah, it'd be interesting to understand the kind of the balance of that. And I suppose, again, something on that specific point, being in crisis mode often means that people end up in line management roles that because we're not recruiting, often people who are technical people who aren't and it's not that technical people can't be good line managers, it's not necessarily that good line managers aren't technical people, but often you'll get people who aren't necessarily cut out for or even intended to do line management ending up in that role because of the skills shortage. It's a bit of a vicious feedback loop there, really.
Yeah, and I don't pretend to know across industries what the how that statistic compares. But the fact is, we have a skills problem in rail, and that isn't helping. So we proactively need to do things to change that. And surely training, at least providing the training for people to understand the basics of what makes a good line manager and what they need to look out for and what performance metrics need to be part of their role, and the roles and the metrics they're setting for other people. It's got to be a good start.
Absolutely. So so we've got two questions that I'm going to merge into one because they're both kind of complementary to each other. So HST Trains asks, what degrees or paths can you recommend for going into railway engineering? And Jamie Bailey asks, what's the closest a recent non-STEM graduate, stupid decision, not necessarily, can get to being involved in the technical side of the railway to fill the gap without having an engineering degree? So those are kind of different but complementary questions. I suppose both of us can answer that. George, I don't know if you want to take that first as a sort of thought. So what pathways are best to go into railway engineering? And also, what is the closest you can get to technical stuff without an engineering degree?
Okay, so I'll start with the second one. Without an engineering degree, you can get incredibly close to the technical stuff. I mean, I think you probably get closer to the technical stuff without a degree, if I'm honest, because a lot of the apprenticeships that you can access through Network Rail. Plenty of others that have their intake every year are incredibly hands-on. They're vocational. You don't need a degree to work on the operations side of the railways quite often. On the passenger side, the passenger interface, depots, they'll be taking on staff. So the answer to that is loads of opportunities. Go on the Railweek website. Have a look. There are materials and links there to various resources that will tell you all of what I'm telling you. To address the first one about
different pathways,
exactly. Look, there are how many different types of railway engineer do you think there are? How many different specialisms?
There's no point listing them because taxonomy means you could list dozens, but dozens basically, and certainly like there are 10. Different hugely. If you want to really split them up, you've probably got 10 very, very different disciplines, and you can split those again by as many factors. So
exactly. So the answer is too big to name here. There are so many pathways. I chose quite a general pathway. I've always liked trains. Didn't know I was going to work in the industry. My degree meant I had the skills to start off on a grad scheme working for a consultancy, and I ended up kind of choosing my path into rail that way. But equally, you could go and do vibration mechanics at some university and end up being a pantograph specialist, and that being your,
or you could be doing chemistry and physics and end up as a permanent way engineer. It happens. Jamie, your question. So your question was specifically about. So we kind of answered it quite broadly, but actually about non-STEM. So even entirely non-STEM subjects. I know, and it's interesting that George is on for this answer. And this is just one example, but I know two Network Rail sponsors that one of them did English literature, and the other one what did they do? They did I think they did international politics, which actually international politics is probably an excellent degree to be a project sponsor. But that's two sponsors, so doing George's job, which, I suppose you can get as involved in the technical stuff as you're interested to get involved in within that. But certainly the role is, it probably helps to be able to hear where you're being bullshitted. And so you can get very close to technical roles without a STEM degree. And also you can pick stuff up, and ultimately then once you're in the door, you can then decide, you know what, maybe I'll do a part-time degree at a background and maybe sidestep that. There are options. I think the key thing is that my preference is always to have as an industry, and even within not just within engineering, not just within technical stuff. Engineering doesn't have to be technical stuff. As I've kind of said before I can't remember which presentation it was. I think actually it was in a meeting for the National Rail Museum recently. I was talking about the fact that engineering covers more than just what engineers do. Engineering kind of covers a huge breadth of stuff, and it doesn't just mean engineers. And so, you can really get stuck in and involved. Deirdre Detour is saying, suggestions for areas that maths graduates can end up in. I mean, good grief, the lot, I think. It's more maths graduates. I know someone who's done a PhD, they started in maths, they then did a bit of an engineering degree, but off the back of a maths degree, and they're now an engineer. So, I mean, very much. But again, not engineering. Detour points out timetable planning, signal design, all these things.
Modelling,
actually,
anything with modelling.
Yeah,
very high in
for
demand
sure.
at the moment. Data. I mean, I talked about the National Skills Academy for Rail earlier, where I got that information from. And their CEO, Neil Robertson, if you haven't met or
He's brilliant.
heard him talk, yeah, just fantastic. Someone who's really inspired me through my career. He always talks about data in this thick Scottish accent, because data is what is going to empower the decisions of the future. That's where the world is going, and the railway industry will be no different. So if you can get yourself understanding how to handle big data, in terms of collecting it, processing, analysing it, and presenting it, you've got a career for life in this industry.
And a few people point with interesting comments that I think immediately tie back into that. Gareth Williams just asked about history graduates. I don't know any history graduate. I mean, plenty of, but history graduates are about picking up either qualitative or quantitative data, interpreting it, and then deriving a useful output, which is exactly what George has just been talking about in terms of data. Like, absolutely critical. So if you're interested, if you've got a history degree, you're interested, you will find a role. Owen O'Neill is a really good example, which is that the Midlands Connect head of rail is a geography graduate. That's a non-STEM. I mean, human geography is a non-STEM subject, I think, theoretically. I don't know. The STEM boundaries are pretty woolly, but that's a non-STEM subject. Really are no barriers to being transport planner, based on not having a science or an engineering degree. Ignored ambience, maths PhD friend, went into long-term timetable planning, capacity planning. Geography hugely relevant. Detour is a statistician and math stats, and teaches on an MSc data science course. These, I think, so many examples. I think we could labour that point more, and it'd be fun to get. It would be fun to have an episode where everyone just comes and tells everyone what their ridiculous pathways were, because they're all so diverse. Right. So okay, I think we've laboured that. Well, we haven't laboured the point. We could. I think, George, we should do, and maybe it's another episode. We should do a session that we don't put any slides prepped. We literally just kind of put a thing up and open it out and have that discussion, because it'd be interesting to explore it. Maybe that's one we can take away offline, because you're right, it'd be interesting to explore that.
Well, look, one of the things that young rail professionals, sorry to interrupt you,
No,
but
no,
just on that, because one of the things that young rail professionals gives young and early career professionals in rail is a voice. And you would be surprised at how directionless some dishes, well, you probably wouldn't be surprised, but how directionless some decisions are made in government and across the thinking minds of the industry. And if we've got something to say and we want to say it to the industry, then we must. If we need to appeal to the industry to say these are the things that you need to do to address the skills shortage, we're at the raw end of this, then we should. So yeah. Opinions are welcome.
Absolutely, it'd be interesting to collect them up. Keep sending in the chat in here, and obviously on the Discord server later, because it's always valuable chat. The careers section of the Discord server is probably the bit of the RailNet Discord server I'm most proud of, because there's all sorts of good discussion happens in there, as well as advice, and people check each other's CVs in there. It's great. So having said all that, we're going to close the episode, I think, before we move into the post-amble, which is there hope, George? Is there hope?
Absolutely not. No.
Yeah, that's it. None. Yeah.
Good night.
Credits roll.
No, of course there's hope. The stats are moving in the right direction. The industry does have some sector-beating, workforce stats. We could go into that another time. I'd be pleased to share that. YRP certainly does. And when I look around the regions and I look at the types of people, the backgrounds of people, the work that people are doing, the enthusiasm, it does give us hope for the future. I'd also say that there are huge swathes of the industry that might not represent that diversity that we're looking for, that are mentors who are giving back their time, hours and hours of time to dedicate to get to bringing the next generation of talent into the industry. It's not all about focusing on those diversity stats. So yeah, there's definitely hope. I love this industry, despite being, like I say, at the raw end of these statistics.
People know that people say that I rant and I stand and I shout about things and I spend a lot of time despairing about the industry and about stuff around it. But I do this. I wouldn't bother if I didn't think there was hope, and I wasn't actually, perhaps confusingly for people, a tremendous optimist about what the railway industry can achieve. I wouldn't be doing this. I wouldn't be doing Rail Natters. I wouldn't be doing any of this if I didn't feel vigorously and strongly optimistic about the future for the rail industry. So absolutely there is hope. There is absolutely hope. Oh, right. So having said there's hope, there's currently no hope for the podcast because I still haven't managed to fix the audio only podcast thing. It's coming. The fix is coming, everyone. But so RailNatter not currently available in audio only form because it's a brocket. That's fine though, because people on Patreon and on the Discord server are helping me to fix it. Thanks to those people. Yeah, patreon.com/GarethDennis if you want to make these sorts of things happen more and choose future guests and episodes and themes and get involved in exclusive stuff. The Discord server is where all of this happens, but more and 24/7. GarethDennis.co.uk/Discord. I'm now at the point where I vaguely know what a Discord server is, so, progress. And then if you want to throw loose change at me vigorously and violently, then paypal.me/GarethDennis is also fine. And every little helps on there. And it kind of goes into the pool and allows me to do more on-location stuff and maybe expand the RailNatter horizons. It is possible. So, having said that, Railweek. George, Railweek is still, it's not finished yet. It's not the 10th of October. It is merely the 6th of October. So, going back to your large face, tell us more about what's coming up in Railweek for the rest of the week.
Well, I implore you to go onto our website. I know people don't really like websites anymore, and it's all got to be on a constant feed.
Yeah.
But sometimes they are a very useful tool for communicating a comprehensive amount of information. The other place to go and look for our events is on the YRP, so youngrailpro.com website, and you can see events way past Railweek into the future. We've got Heritage Railway events coming up. We've got a series of Welcome to Rail events. So for those of you who are asking questions about, how do I get into rail, or if you really are just a brand new this year on the intake, YRP's teamed up with Network Rail, and we've got a series of these talks going on through the year, every fortnight until Christmas. So yeah, lots of exciting things going on. Lots of things that aren't on the website that I should probably know about that are just happening organically around the country. People go, oh yeah, it's Rail Week. Oh, we'll put a stand up here. We'll hand out pamphlets here and there. So lots going on.
Absolutely, and it's worth saying a reminder to everyone that YRP membership is free, folks. So get involved.
Absolutely,
you can make it happen, and it's the advantage of it being free. And I suppose to kind of the last point I'm going to make about YRP is that YRP kind of, it's different to professional institutions. It's not instead of them. It sort of operates differently. It does different things. And in a way, it stitches a lot of those together. It allows, people in the IRO or the IET or the PWI or the IC or the IMECI or AN other to all kind of combine across and kind of cross over those boundaries. So it's sharing the skills across and the people skills and the experiences across those boundaries. So it's a really important part of the mix, and it's free. So, yeah. Now, what else have I got to continue doing plugs for? Oh, yeah, that's right. It's my turn for plugs. This Friday, if you're interested in such things, it's Anarchy on the. In fact, no, it's not Anarchy, but the people are taking over on the archipelago. So come and join that on Friday night if you know what on earth I'm talking about. And next episode, which I had to decide what was going to happen 20 minutes before the episode started. But what I'm going to do, actually, it might interest some of you, is how do you fit bigger trains on the British Railway network? And I'm going to go through, there's sufficient water under the bridge for one of my route gauging projects. It's one of the things I'm a specialist on. And it's going to be an episode where I basically talk through what one of those is and how one of those works. So we're going to be talking about how you get fatter trains to travel on the British Railway network. So hopefully that'll be interesting. I'll put drawings and also a glossy video that might be interesting or people might laugh at. Generally, will give you a chance to explore, and it'll give maybe some of you who are interested a bit of a hint as to what I actually do in my day job, because I never really talk about that much on here. Anywho, George, it only really remains to say thank you so much for joining us. It's been chaotic. We're 18 minutes after, which is frankly not too bad for a RailNatter these days. It's been an absolute pleasure. We've covered a lot of ground there. We covered less ground in the open Q&A, which was, I suppose, inevitable. But I think we covered a lot of really useful stuff there. We talked a lot at the start, actually. I think it was useful. Thank you so much.
Absolute pleasure. I like to think of myself as accessible. So you can get my details through the website or LinkedIn or whatever. Welcome questions on this stuff. If anyone's got any questions about joining YRP, you've got any good ideas, get in touch. Thanks so much for having me to talk about what I love to talk about. There's no thing in the world better to be interviewed about something you're really passionate about.
It's true. Very true. It's very, very easy to talk. I'm being interviewed about level boarding tomorrow, which very much is on that theme. It's something that I'm so passionate about. I have done zero prep, and I need to do some stats prep because stats are nice, but it's so easy to talk about things you love. And I'm going to end on a question, actually, because it's a useful and relevant question before we both tip our hat and wave vigorously, which is, can you join YRP if you're not in the industry, but you're young and interested?
Yes.
There you are. Not everyone. Yeah, yes, you can. I mean, YRP, particularly for like, I know for graduates, it was like you go and speak to people who are still kind of not graduates, sorry, to like undergrads. You go and speak to undergrads and talk about the rail industry. So there is a connection to pre-industry people.
Absolutely. Look, the chair of the West Midlands, Vina, she works for Telent, and she no longer works in rail. She did, but now she doesn't, and she still wants to be a part of it.
Yeah. It's something that people are very keen to facilitate the industry as a whole, and sometimes that is still being done if they're technically outside of that industry. George, I think that nicely shows how much passion can be inside, the industry can incite, which is nice to end on a bit of a hopeful note. It's been such a pleasure. George Chilcott, everyone. And it only remains for us to both sort of shout cheerio loudly into our microphones. Cheerio, everyone. Cheerio.
Cheerio.